Great. Well, now we're moving on to winter storms, and we're going to hear
All
from
right,
Kevin on this
we
topic.
got fire. Now we're going to talk ice. Um, I have been able to respond to a lot of natural disasters around the state, but be it wildfires or tornadoes. We have, and up in this climate, the winters kind of seem to last a while, and the effects of winter can last a while. And we have these pretty dangerous kind of, I think they call them like shoulder seasons. So in the spring, when the weather kind of starts to change, that's when we start to see more tornadoes, or sorry, in the fall. And in the spring, we start to see a lot of snow melt, when that's when we start to see a lot of floods. And then in the middle of all that, we have snow damage and a lot of accumulation. Here's an example of some of the things that we've been facing in the last couple of years. So 2007, huge ice storm in Portland. I'm going to show you a pinball scene from that season. We have the 2007 flood that happened in January of 2007. The Portland landslide up on the West Hills in Portland. The Sandy River flood, that one was a huge surprise. People think I live up in the mountains, I don't need flood insurance. I'm far away from anything that can flood. Well, the Sandy River moves around a lot, and that definitely moved around during that flood season. The Manzanita tornado, and then on the almost 1 year anniversary of that, this is kind of a funny story. I was at a financial beginnings conference in Canby, and I get a call from KGW asking about what's happened with Manzanita 1 year after, because it was the day after the 1 year anniversary. Well, there was a tornado in Canby, the 1 year anniversary of the one in Manzanita, and it flipped over a couple airplanes at the Aurora Airport. I thought
Out
he was.
of nowhere.
Yeah, I thought he was calling me about that because my phone flipped out on it, and he's like, "What tornado?" And so I ended up meeting him at the airport because I was already there. And then we had the Malheur winter storm that was catastrophic to the onion industry. Any of you guys like the bloomin' onion? And those, oh yeah, the bloomin' onion that's grown in Malheur County. And there's a competitor company that they're both grown in Malheur County. 25% of the nation's onion storage was lost in that storm. It's devastating. And then this last winter storm, it was statewide. This happened. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the 2016-17, what we call the snowpocalypse of 2016-17. 4 major snowstorms and ice storms hit Oregon in 6-week period. This is a picture of a warehouse. I believe this is in Hillsboro, northwest part of the state. Central Oregon, this is a gymnasium in La Pine that collapsed. Southern Oregon ice storm, this is actually in Eugene, and this ice storm spread from Eugene all the way down to Roseburg, Medford, and along the Coast Range as well. A lot of trees went down. Althea mentioned the close off of some of these communities. A lot of it happened with these ice and these downed trees. This is Eastern Oregon. This is just one example. There were 50 sheds that went down. That was really devastating to the community. You guys ready for? This was in 2007. Just to show, people think, oh, I have a Subaru, I have this really nice car, snow chains, tires, I can handle anything. Whoa. This was a very small slope in Portland. It wasn't even that steep. And this guy here is trying everything he can. That looks like an all-wheel drive vehicle there. We laugh now, it's a long time ago, but you're going to hear a very panicked mother here in a second. And bless the person who filmed this, because the insurance questions for this were outrageous. It just, who's to blame? You can see that car is pushing into that car, pushing into that car. Who's at fault? With this video, things were able to get sorted out really well. Oh, they're trying. I can just imagine in the passenger seat of that car is the guy's wife just, why are you doing this? Stop the car, just hit him. That's what would have been in my car. Now it's going sideways, yeah. So this goes on for 5 minutes. I've cut this down for 2 minutes. We're not going to watch all of it. This is a serious auto insurance issue here, right? It's really important. Don't assume that the best way to avoid financial risk is to just avoid the risk, right? Don't be driving around when the weather's like this. Don't assume that you have the awesomest car and the best set of tires and you know how to drive and everyone else are a bunch of idiots and you're the only one who knows what they're doing. Stay off the road. At the end of this video, there's a fire engine that starts to come on the scene, and thank goodness it stops before getting to the road. It actually was there to close off the road. So if you're ever in this situation, please reach out to one of our consumer advocates that can help sort out all the insurance issues involved with this. And the other thing too, in the wintertime is we have floods. In 2007, Vernonia, this was one of the last major catastrophic floods we've had in the state. One thing about Vernonia, very few people in Vernonia had flood insurance, even though that particular basin was pretty prone for flooding. As you can see here, it was a very expensive, over $30 million in damages. I think I have one more slide on. Many of those homes had to be demolished or lifted up, relocated, and very few of them, I think it was 20%, had flood insurance. But since that time, because there was a natural disaster, flood disaster declared there, a lot more people have flood insurance in that area. Now, one thing to consider with flood insurance, it's not covered under your homeowner's policy. You have to buy a separate endorsement for flood. And oftentimes I hear from people saying, I went and talked to my insurance agent and they said, I don't need flood insurance. Well, great. It's going to be very affordable if you don't need it. But your insurance agent might try to sell you something else, right? If you have the money you want to spend on flood insurance, you're saying you don't really need flood insurance. Let me sell you a life insurance policy or an annuity or something else. If you want flood insurance, buy flood insurance. Now, a flood isn't this massive catastrophic event all the time. Now, by definition, a flood under the National Flood Insurance Program is an inundation of land 2 or more acres in size or 2 or more properties. It's very small. So if a fire hydrant bursts and it floods the street and then floods your living room, how many properties is that? 2. The city owns one of them and you own the other. So it can be very, very small. A couple years ago, I responded to a winter storm up in Tillamook. And there was a woman who lived up on this hill, and Tillamook was flooding, and she was just looking out over on her deck saying, boy, those poor suckers down there in the valley don't have, they're flooding out. And I mean, of course, her heart went out to them, but she was so grateful to be where she was because she was not at risk of flooding. Now, up the hill from her was an old logging pond. And above that pond was an old slope that had been logged. Well, that slope gave way in the storm and filled that logging pond, and that logging pond ended up going right through her living room. She didn't have flood insurance because she didn't live anywhere near a floodplain. She wasn't in a flood risk area, and she had no assistance from that. Now, when a flood like this happens, if there's a disaster declaration, the first money goes in for public infrastructure. The second money goes in for loans to businesses to help kind of reestablish the community. And then the third is the public assistance, and those are usually loans as well, if you can't get access to capital any other way. So don't rely on FEMA to bail you out when there's a flood disaster or a winter storm like this, because you're going to have to pay that money back, and you're going to have to get in the back of the line. If you have flood insurance, you're going to be at the front of the line, and you're going to be able to get taken care of. So auto insurance during winter weather. My cousin, who likes Stranger Things, any of you watched that show? When Stranger Things season 2 came out, she wanted to have a big party at her house, and so they did like a watch party for Stranger Things, and a sequoia tree fell down and chopped 6 or 7 cars, bang, 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 all down the street. Only one of those cars had comprehensive and collision insurance on it. All the others were totaled, and they had no coverage. So if you don't have comprehensive, which is other things hitting your car like a tree, you won't have any coverage. Now, collision coverage is if something like we saw on that street with the car pinballing around, that's collision. If you're at fault and you bounce against every other car, you're colliding with a lot of other cars. If you have collision, your car will get fixed. If you don't have collision, you won't get fixed. But the cars that you hit will go after your liability on coverage on your policy, and they will get fixed. So if you're worried about that, make sure you talk with your agent about comprehensive and collision. In most cases, that type of coverage isn't that much more expensive. I had a car that I wanted to take it off, and it was only going to reduce my premium by $20, so I kept it on. Are we doing okay for time?
Yes.
Okay. And then the last thing for your home, we get a lot of problems. You can see this diagram here about ice dams. Ice dams are extremely damaging to homes. And you can Google this online, check out ice dams. So basically the way this works is that the warmth from inside your house, the insulated area, the warm area melts the snow on your roof and it goes down to that eave. And then that eave isn't insulated and it will freeze. And the ice will continue to build up. When I was out in Ontario responding to the big snowstorm out there, I saw ice dams like a foot thick that you had to go up there with an axe and knock them off and chip them up. And so the best thing to do in this situation is to get the snow off the roof in a safe way as much as possible. The issue out in Eastern Oregon, they had 2 feet of snow in just a very short period of time. And so they weren't able to get the snow off as fast as they otherwise would have liked to. If you're in this situation and you have ice dam problems, you usually don't notice the damage until the spring, because the water will run down the walls and it'll kind of just sit there. And then in the spring, as things start to warm up, you start getting mold all over your house. Most insurance policies have an exclusion for mold because it's a sign of neglect, right? You had that leaky sink that you never took care of, they're not going to take care of it. But if you think it may be caused by an ice dam, contact us, contact the Division of Financial Regulation, and we actually work with insurance companies all the time for denying for mold and other water damage from this. But again, mitigation is the best thing you can do, is get the snow off the roof in a safe way and control those ice dams. And that's it for winter storms.
I have a question about if your neighbor's tree falls on your house during a winter storm, whose insurance covers that?
All right, let's see a show of hands. Your neighbor's tree falls on your house. Raise your hand if you think your neighbor pays for it. It's his tree. Raise your hand if you think you pay for it. That's right. It might be your neighbor's tree, but it's in your living room. It's your tree now. Just like if your tree falls on your neighbor's house, your tree falls, then their insurance will pay for it. When I was in Manzanita during that tornado, there was an old house, the roof flew off of it and landed on the neighbor's house. So now they had 2 roofs. And the neighbor had to use their insurance to have that removed. So that's a question we get a lot. Your insurance will pay for it if it falls on your house. Now, if you can prove that your neighbor was neglectful, maybe the guy was out there with the chainsaw and accidentally dropped it on your house, that's different. That's a liability issue. But if it's a winter storm, wind blows it down, that'll be covered. Now, if the tree falls on your garage and your car's in the garage, this happened a lot. We see this a lot. Your homeowners will pay for the garage. Your auto insurance policy will pay for the car if you have comprehensive.
Okay, everybody get that straight? Great. Question from the audience?
I can talk loud. Okay. How does it work with insurance and liability or comprehensive or collision when it goes over the caps, the limits? Yeah, because I know a lot of people in Oregon just go with the minimum requirements, and that really doesn't go very far, especially if you're hitting half a dozen cars. So how does that work once you're over that limit?
Yeah, so in Oregon, we have legal limits for liability, and most insurance companies, the good reputable ones that I know, won't write the minimums. They write well above that. You kind of have to look at your community too. If everyone in your street drives a Lexus and they're highly litigious, you might want to have higher liability limits.
So the issue with the neighbor's tree falls on your house, but it was a dead tree.
Yeah, we get that a lot. You really need to, in that situation, you want to be complaining, you want a paper trail, maybe get an arborist out there. Now, if that tree is leaning over on your property, you own that airspace. You're more than within your rights to cut down that tree that's over your fence that's hanging over. You might want to just be a good neighbor and say, hey, neighbor, I'm going to be limbing this tree that's over my shed. Just let them know you're doing it. But yeah, you're well within your rights to do that.
Wow, that's good to know. Okay, one more question on flood insurance. If your insurance agent says, oh, you don't need that, you live on a hill, you're fine, where would you go to find flood insurance? Would you just Google for something like that?
Yeah, I believe the National Flood Insurance Program has a list of agents, or at least they had. The website has changed ownership. It's done through a contract with FloodSmart, but it's changed. So I would just look for agents in your area that write flood insurance.
Okay, great. Any other questions on winter storms? Time for one more. All right, moving along to earthquakes. So I'm sorry, I forgot a question on winter storms. We have one more. What are the main health concerns during winter storms, and how can people be prepared to address these?
Yeah, so I think a lot of folks go immediately to injury, hypothermia, frostbite, and those are concerns. But actually, what we end up seeing is a day or two after, when everybody starts using their generator, we see an increase in carbon monoxide poisoning. And so I guess the recommendation there is, if you have a generator, make sure you use it at least 25 feet away from your home and make sure the windows and doors are sealed. Then after that, if the power's gone out, we start to see issues with stomach illnesses from food poisoning. Folks, maybe didn't clean out their fridge appropriately, or maybe didn't leave the refrigerator door closed long enough to keep the food good. And so for that, we have a sheet actually at the back on how to keep your food safe during a storm, and how to decide what you can keep and what you need to throw out. And again, our same concerns with power outages and our vulnerable folks that are electronic dependent.
And how does all of that also relate to Oregonians' financial health with unexpected medical expenses?
Yeah, I mean, health is expensive. And I think one of the challenges we see for folks on the insurance side is more around medications and getting medications refilled. A lot of times, the recommendation is 2 weeks ready, but your insurance company doesn't always give you the wiggle room to get prescriptions refilled, to build that stock. So it might be worth talking to your pharmacist or your provider about how you might be able to get 2 weeks ready on your medications.
Yeah, there's a recent law that passed, but you're right, sometimes the timing can be an issue. You need to get a prescription you can get up to 90 days prescription filled. But again, it depends on the type of drug, and it depends on the kind of the timing. So if you're at the end of 90 days and then the disaster strikes, it's not doing you much good, but it's better than taking advantage of that 90-day supply is great. But you can also pair them up so you can pick up all your prescriptions on the same day, rather than having to go back every couple of weeks so that might be helpful as well.
Great, thank you both.